Ooh, it's a portal day. Um, I don't know if you all heard any of that just now. I just saw the live button go on, but I we are broadcasting live in New Orleans on 105.3 FM and the United Public Radio Network, as well as our various Facebook, YouTube pages. And I'm sorry, my dog is literally sitting right here forcing me to pet her. So that's her name's Ella. She's a Swiss Mountain Dog. And tonight, that's actually a topic that goes along with my show tonight. The theme, um, pets. We Joe and I were just talking about storms. They're in New Orleans, and many times I've been struck by lightning and such, and I draw in a lot of electricity from storms, a lot of energy. It makes my heart beat fast, things like that. So, grounding is still very important with all the glitches we've had on the internet tonight. Um, but animals do that. That's just a fun fact. I don't know if a lot of people know that. One of the ways, if you're, empathic, if you absorb energies from whether it be storms, people, work related situations, whatever it is, and you go home and you cuddle with your dog, um, play with them, take them for walks, whatever it might be. And that is an excellent way to ground yourself and raise your vibration. Um, my animals, as most of you know, I like most animals better than most people for that matter. Not anyone in general. I just love the energy that animals give off, and we definitely don't deserve them. I know. Well, speak of the devil. I think that was a sign right there. I don't even know what that was. Hold on. So sorry. Here's my dog here. All right. So tonight I am going to welcome. I'm excited. She's not here yet. I'm still waiting for her to come through. But I have Reverend Jennifer Elizabeth Moore um, coming on, and she is a master a master healer. She works with the EFT system, um, highly empathic, obviously. She's also doing. She collaborated with the Modern Medicine Lady for the empathic women's system, and she has a lot. I started receiving um, her emails, her newsletters, and she has videos that she sends, and she is so much good information. I was in this place of not knowing how to protect myself as an empath, how to stay away from, without completely isolating myself, how to be able to s- be surrounded by people and go in public settings and things like that and not absorb all of those energies. And it has been such a struggle for me living in a city because of course there's cars and accidents and road rage and all of the toxic um energy from the skyscrapers and the um gosh, here we have trains and we have buses and everything else that puts off that energy, the river. Um, and so it was very, very difficult for me for a long time to learn how to um, stay balanced and stay grounded and not completely absorb all of those things. So and that was really important um, because it can consume you and it can manifest in a very bad way. I'm sure some of the times that I have relapsed into Lyme disease, for that matter, um, also played a big part as far as um, my ability, how quickly I was able to heal from things. So, oh my goodness. Oh, I am so sorry. I'm sure that is extremely loud on the internet on the webs. I gotta put my dog up here shortly. Um, yes. So animals can feel all of those things as well. And I don't. She doesn't even usually bark, so it's funny that this happened. But okay, are you done, Ella? Do you want to be on camera too? All right. All right. I think she's calming down. Well, I'm gonna try to email my guest one more time. I know I had her. I have her information here. So, um, it's just a weird. So I guess I should go into why the 22nd is such an odd day for all of these things to happen. First of all, so many things in my own life have happened on the 22nd of any month. And that's because if you go into numerology, there's master numbers. So you have all of the numbers that can't be broken down. Your 11, 22, and 33 are all master numbers. So, but the 22nd especially has always been um, kind of a crazy day for me. So one of these days I'll probably do an entire segment on that, because that's something that, based on my own experience, has happened quite frequently. And especially when you get into um, mediumship and the paranormal and even portals and things like that. So Jennifer is here now. I see where she has logged on. So I will welcome her. I am so pleased to have her here. Reverend Jennifer Elizabeth Moore. Let me add her to there you go. Can you hear me?
I can totally hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yay!
Oh, the glitches of the system, I tell you.
Oh my goodness. And we're not even in a Mercury retrograde.
I was just explaining my producer, Joe Montaldo, before we ever even started the show or anything, he was getting kicked off. I mean, this is somewhat normal for me because the powers that be,
Mhm, mhm.
it happens almost every time. I'll go to start a show and my computer will crash. Something will happen. I'll literally have it all set up, hit start, or like tonight, my dog who never barks is all just going crazy. She just,
I'm always grateful when it's somebody else's dog who is barking on the podcast
oh
over
my
mine,
gosh,
I
I
gotta
know.
say. Yeah. As you're talking about this, you make me think about the fact that, as magical, sort of sensitive, paranormal people, electronic devices and watches and other kinds of
Uh,
stuff work weird. Like, I could not wear a
yes.
watch for the longest
Mm-mm.
time because, or I still don't wear a watch. I carry a phone as my time device because
Yeah.
within 2 days or 3 days of having any kind of watch, basically it would start losing time because like my energy system would cause it to go wonky. So,
I'm the same way, and you know what? Now I've almost come if if I've been having a bad day or I'm in traffic and something it has to be a pretty powerful it has to be a lot of emotional energy coming from me for this to happen. But I bought for the first time a newer vehicle with all the electronic stuff, which it's not an electric vehicle, but it does have, a lot of electric components.
yeah.
And I noticed when I first got it, I was much less balanced than I am nowadays. But
Mhm.
I mean, things like my check engine light would come on randomly, everything, and I would take it to the shop, and it would be the next day or whatever because they can't get to it right away. So it had sat for a little while, and they'd say, "Well, we can't find anything wrong with it." And I'm like, I get so frustrated, and there goes another glitch.
Yeah. Yeah.
but uh, but yeah, even and I've talked about this before. I used to trip breakers in my house if I got upset when I was little, like light bulbs, low light bulbs. Probably I was extremely mad one time and a transformer blew outside my house. So whether I directly had to do with that or not, I do have I've been struck by lightning, electrocuted, all of those things too. So
Mm. Mm.
I just conduct it. It's
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you remind me of something I heard a really long time ago about the idea of poltergeists and how frequently, a preteen or an adolescent is in the house, and
yes.
how our energy can really set stuff off. And I've definitely had a number of conversations with people about um, periods in their life where the house has felt particularly haunted. And
Mhm.
while it's not certainly is not always that you've got a kid with a lot of intense energy, it seems to be a very common thing when suddenly you've got a kid, especially if a kid is going through a lot of difficult stuff, and that they just seem to have that intense ability to emote. And it follows that with those of us who are highly sensitive, empathic, psychic, intuitive people, that not only do we have really extreme emotional energy, but we also have some pretty extreme psychic energy as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I have 3 redheads, myself and my 2 kids, all under one roof, and we there are times there, and I didn't even realize I wasn't consciously doing this, over the last few years now that they're getting older and teenager, where we would all be at a different place around like full moons and stuff because obviously there's a lot more energy, and it wasn't even on purpose, but I mean it's probably for the best because who knows, we couldn't all be in the same place during those days, but my daughter might go stay with my parents and then my son's with my sister or something, so
That
while
sounds
I was working with
smart.
something.
That
But
sounds
but like
smart.
I said, I wasn't even doing it. I mean, in hindsight, I probably was, my
Yeah.
higher conscious, but um, yeah, it worked out because we didn't destroy the house or, each other in the process. So
Mhm. Mhm. Well, and redheads are really, I mean, they don't call them redheaded stepchilds for nothing.
right.
Redheads, I for many years I actually worked as a tattooer and did it as a healing art, like for 20 years of my earlier career. And one of the things that was kind of known in the industry was that redheads tended to, their skin was wonderful to work on, but they tended to be more sensitive. They had a lower pain threshold than ordinary people. And they also were, more likely to bleed a little bit more. But I've definitely, and I've seen this, like redheads tend to be more sensitive than a lot of other people are.
Also, it really doesn't make any sense. We don't have the same reaction to things like anesthesia or at
Mhm.
dentists. My kids were just at the dentist. I was telling their dentist this last week because from my like I was traumatized at doctors and dentists when I was younger because of things exactly like this, where it's due to like the
The
M1
MTHFR gene
something.
mutation.
Yes.
Yes.
Um, the we don't have the same our bodies metabolize any type of painkiller or anesthesia much faster than a normal person. So even though we don't tolerate pain as well, we also don't anesthesia doesn't work, or Novocaine,
Right.
or
Right.
lidocaine, or any of those things. Um, and it took, I mean, I had my wisdom teeth taken out, and I remember kicking literally, because they only gave me one shot in each gum, and they had to cut them out. And so the dentist started when I could still feel it. And I literally kicked him in the shin from my
Mm.
chair, just as
Mhm.
not on, I mean, not intentionally. It was a reaction. Um, and he couldn't believe, he's like, there's no way she can feel this. And I absolutely, it was so, and, and I've even flatlined during surgeries because I had an adverse reaction to
Mhm.
anesthesia.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Like, I
I
think
was
they should teach people these
They
things.
should teach people these things, and yet, I mean, all of us who are sort of the outliers with the strange gene mutations and who are the highly sensitive empathic people, the doctors, like, I don't know, I have a motto that I've been living by for a number of years, which is don't judge your empathic rainbow by colorblind standards. And
Mhm.
it's like we live in a culture where the quote neurotypical unquote define the define the baseline and define the bound of like what is, and yet it's sort of like we're basing our experience and reality on a spectrum that is extremely limited. And
Yes.
there are those of us, and I actually believe like we are, it's funny that this is the podcast is the missing piece, because I think in some ways we are the missing pieces. We are the sensates. We are the new mutants. We are the next level of evolution where we are more sensitive, where we are picking up the stuff that's going on in the world around us. And yet you've got these muggles who just are like, really? She's reacting, or she just processed all that anesthesia. What just happened? And
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up with people in my family. My mother is somebody who, if you gave her a quarter of the amount of medication that an ordinary person would take, she would have a really strong reaction to it. And it's
Mhm.
something where you have, and I think that this is something that goes into when you're an empath, when you're a sensitive person, how incredibly important it is to acknowledge and validate our own truth when we live in a world that is constantly telling us that we are overreacting, that we're taking it too personally, that this could not possibly be happening to us. And yet it's like, no, this is really
Yes.
happening to me.
That was well, and I think that, after these last few days, as I've been reading your material, your emails, um, I well, okay, first of all, before we get to that,
Yeah,
since I'm sorry, I just talk to people like I've known them forever, but
I do too.
but
That's
but
one of
I
the things
forget.
about being a psychic and a telepath. It's like
Yes.
you and I are just like, oh, hi, friend. I haven't seen you in a
Yes.
couple hundred years, but, hey
Right.
there. Yeah.
But for my listeners and viewers, they're probably like, "What are these doing?" I mean,
Why
I'm
are
sure
these
they're used to
women
it with
talking
me,
about who
but
the hell is she?
yes. So first of all, Jennifer, if you would, do you go by Jen or Jennifer?
So Jennifer is my formal business and author name. Everybody calls me Jen, except for my nephews and my brother and sister and my mother, who call me Jenny. and I can always tell if somebody doesn't know me if they try to call me Jenny, because that is the very, very special family name. But pretty much everybody calls me Jen, so please call me Jen. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Jen, give us a little, kind of this a background, your background story. Um, I completely forgot what I was going to say, but yes, I don't want to do the whole. Tell us about
Sure,
yourself.
I'll just tell
Oh
yeah,
my.
so my name is Jennifer Moore, also, and I go by the name Jen, except if you're my nephews, then you call me Jenny. And I am the author of the book Empathic Mastery, with the subtitle that is, a 5-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success. And I am the former hot mess who wrote this. I also have referred to myself as a former world class awfulizer. I come from a long line of people who worry about absolutely everything and can come up with a lot of stuff. And I'm the author of Empathic Mastery, and I am a master trainer for EFT International. I'm actually one of 122 master trainers who are here on this planet teaching people how to use EFT impeccably. And if you're wondering what EFT stands for, is that what you were going to ask me?
That was my next one, but
Yeah.
I was gonna make sure that okay, I think that glitch went away.
Oh, good. Okay.
I couldn't hear
Um,
you there for a for a
Oh
second.
dear. Okay, so what I was saying is that I am also a master trainer for EFT International. I'm one of the 122 master trainers in on this entire planet who teach people how to use EFT really
Wow.
precisely and really impeccably. There's a lot of so EFT is also known as tapping, and it stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques. And in the more than 3 decades that I have been working as a healer, I have never, ever found a tool that is more effective, that is more elegant, or gentler than EFT. And so I absolutely love this. And what I do is that I absolutely love to work with other highly sensitive, empathic people, intuitives, light workers, sort of very magically oriented, creative people to help them go from taking on all the thoughts, the feelings, the energy, the sensation, the pain of the world around them to really being able to recognize what's theirs and what's not theirs, release the stuff that is no longer serving them, and really start to use their gifts to make a difference in this world. And my mission is to support as many empaths as I possibly can, as long as I am breathing in this body. And considering that I've written a book, hopefully long after I'm gone, so that we can be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Because what I have found is that many of us who are highly sensitive and empathic, the thing is that in my experience, there's like you got psychics, you got mediums, you've got intuitives, and you got empaths. And the thing is that psychics, mediums, and intuitives are open and picking up information in the same way that an empath is, except that they can tell the difference between what's theirs and what's other people's stuff. Like they know they're getting information, but they also know that that information is coming from some other source. And the thing about an empath that makes us very unique is that we pick up all the information that's going on in the world around us, but instead of picking it up through one of the clairs, where it's like we have like clairvoyance or clairaudience or clairsentience or claircognizance, we pick things up through our own processing system and through our whole sensory thing, and we feel things as if they're our own experience. And so what gets so confusing for empaths, unlike psychics and intuitives and mediums, is that we'll be getting the information, but we are filtering it through our perception and our experience as if it's our own stuff. And
Mhm.
this can be so incredibly
Ooh.
confusing. And so many, I cannot even count the number of highly sensitive, empathic people that I've worked with over the many years that I've been doing this work who have heard like it's almost like a script that has been written. You're overreacting, you're taking it too personally, you're taking it too seriously, you're just being crazy, you've got an overactive imagination, just let it go, stop thinking about it, stop worrying about it. And then one of my favorites is, you're not feeling that. You're not going through that. Why are you worrying about that person's experience? Why are you so upset because that person is having such a hard time? And as empaths, we get upset when other people are having a hard time.
Yes. So I was gonna say, I have, I'm one of those weird mutants. I have 3 spleens. So the emotion connected to the spleen is overthinking and worrying, and they're all 100%, they're not like accessory spleens. They're functional. So with the 3, you can see why I mean, it's
Yeah,
constant. I just
well,
overthink everything.
and the humors, thinking about it, it's like when somebody's splenic, back in the sort of the medieval, like the four humors, it's like to be, to be extrally, wow. How did you find out that you had three spleens? Like that seems even like a random
So
thing.
yeah, this was before they did that much. There was a lot of research done on chimeras, um, but this was back in, gosh, the late 90s when I went to college. Um, I got mono actually from a dentist office. I had a root canal, and all of a
Mm.
sudden, like a few weeks later, I got mono, and I assumed it was from my mouth being open for like 7 hours. So, but um, I all of a sudden I had this protrusion from my side, like from my rib cage. A normal person's spleen swells to about 100 times its normal size. Um, when they have mono or things like that. Mine was, I mean, it looked like a third boob, like it was sticking out of my rib cage. And so when they did the, sonograms and ultrasounds, things like that, um, you could see them. They were all 3 of them were swollen. Um,
Wow.
and then and then I had more tests done and stuff. And um, so that, but I didn't know until much later that, or maybe I didn't believe it, how much emotions and things like that are absolutely related to different organs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how big of a part that plays in our, because later on, aside from like the mono and stuff, I got Lyme disease. I had like scarlet fever when I was little. I had all these immune suppressant, which I was talking about right before you came on, which a lot of empaths, because we don't know how to, we just take everything in, and we don't have a way to get rid of it. So,
Well, and I was actually interviewing somebody from my podcast, the Empathic Mastery Show, the other day, and we were actually talking about gene mutations, and we were talking about empaths and the correlation between some of these gene mutations that make it so that we don't methylate the same way or process things the same way that ordinary people do, but that also make us more vulnerable to autoimmune diseases, to getting Lyme disease. I'm also a Limey survivor, chronic Lyme person. And I come from, in my family, um, I would say I am probably the most overt empath in my entire family. But in my family, there's this gene mutation called the MTHFR gene mutation, which is all about our body's ability to process. Especially to methylate things through our liver and to process toxins. And this other woman I was talking to is from Australia. Her name is Magic Barclay. And Magic was talking about, basically, she confirmed what I had been suspecting because she's done a lot of work with people around this. And she's like, oh, yeah, there is a direct connection between these gene mutations and empaths, like that many of us who are sort of special also have all of these gene mutations. And my husband is a very dear, very special, very magical person, but he's definitely not the same. And it's interesting because, looking at his genes and looking at mine, I am a hothouse flower with a ton of bizarre gene mutations. And I'm super sensitive. My mutation that I learned or I discovered when I was in high school is I like have no knuckle on my pinky finger. Like, I have
Oh,
3
wow.
knuckles on my hand, yeah, and I didn't know it until I was drawing a hand, and my teacher looked at my hand and he said,
And
"Why,
she's like,
Jennifer, why are there
"Huh,
3 knuckles on that hand?" And I said,
that's
"Because
interesting."
you only have 3 knuckles." And he's like, "No, you don't." And he throws his fist in front of me and he's like, "See?" And I was like, "No, it's see." And I showed him my hand and it was missing the extra knuckle. But
Wow.
I really, it's just so fascinating how much there's that direct connection between, our physiology and our experience and our feelings about the world.
So every time I've had about 5. I mean, there's been others that I didn't actually like flatline, things like that, about 5 near-death experiences. But after each one, I don't know how to explain to anyone who hasn't, I guess, died in this lifetime. um, your heart chakra is completely like, everything is like reset when you come back to life. And so it was always those times that back when, I would go to church, I would do all of these things. I was volunteering for different like nursing homes. I was doing stuff, but it was those times that it was so difficult for me, because I would be sitting there in church and, I not only was I experiencing all of these emotions from everyone around me, but after each time I became more intuitive. I became
Mhm.
more receptive. All the clairs, I was each it's like each time I added on a new gift, that
Mhm.
almost killed me.
Mhm.
So if that makes
Mhm.
sense. So
Totally makes sense.
I would be sitting there and like all these voices, inner voices of everyone around me, technically, I guess I was hearing their thoughts. But this was only a few years ago, before I learned how to really control it better. Um, and I was like, the world, and my doctor said, Trish, you're going to have another heart attack if you don't do something, and I was like, well, how the world is breaking my heart.
Mhm.
So how do you fix
Mhm.
that? Literally, I'm like, I can't see roadkill without completely reliving the entire accident. I can't go by a spider web that's caught a bug in it because I feel that bug's fear. I was like, I can't live like this. I can't.
Yeah.
Teach me
Yeah.
how.
Yeah.
Um, and it's
Well,
overwhelming.
it is overwhelming. It is so overwhelming. And, there are a couple things you're talking about that just come to my mind. One is that I think that where your ordinary, average, intuitive or psychic tends to experience something through one or two dominant clairs, whereas empaths will often experience the information coming through whichever dominant sensory awareness is around us. And so we are more inclined to have all the clairs because we're around people who are, and even animals and other things, but who are picking things up on a visual field, who are picking things up on an auditory field, who are picking things up more on a sensory kinesthetic field. And what I've found is that empaths tend to have all the things. Now, we may have certain things that show up for us more readily and more accessibly, like some of us are more visual, some of us are more
Mm,
auditory, but as empaths we will often get all the clairs going because of that ability to absorb and receive. It kind of reminds me of some of those science fiction movies or series where that idea of every time, like usually it's like the villain who kind of consumes somebody, but every time the villain or somebody comes in contact with somebody and they kind of vanquish somebody, they receive the gift or the ability of that person, and then suddenly they have those additional abilities. And I think that empaths tend to, once we're in the presence of somebody with some of those abilities, we will absorb those abilities. But a lot of times, especially after having near death experiences or having experiences where our energy system has really been reconfigured, it's not like we're just clairvoyant when we're around them. It's like we're around them and then we remain clairvoyant. And so I
I think
think
it
that
works
that's part of it.
opposite too.
Yeah.
Do you notice that when you're around certain people, you tend to pass off some of your gifts to them as well?
Um, I would say I'm not necessarily, I've never really thought about it that way, but I absolutely transmit by osmosis a lot of information to my students. And
Yeah.
energetically, I do a lot of sort of like setting an intention and explaining something to people, but know that what I'm also doing is kind of calibrating their system energetically as I'm explaining something. So I've
Hmm.
never articulated that the way you just said it, but I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I do." You know?
Well,
Yeah.
and the only reason I started noticing this was, people would come into my life. And first of all, when somebody new comes in, I should also mention with my chimerism, I have two different DNAs, which now they think might actually be two people, in one
Mm.
body. So,
Mhm.
so I don't know how they might each have their own gifts, and they just constantly, but, but when somebody new comes into my life, first of all, they have to get adjusted to my life. We live
Mhm.
in a magical world as empaths. Like everything has, and I mean everybody does. It's just not everybody sees it in the
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
that we do, and not everybody interacts with the universe the way we do, I guess.
Right. Right.
And so first of all, it takes new people in my life a while to get used to that, and understandably so. The human mind is fragile, and so we've been so programmed that um it it's profound, and it's something y- I would have said the same thing, 10, 15. Well, no, I've always seen the unseen and stuff, but I mean, I can see the perspective. But
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
once those people were no longer in my life, say not friends necessarily, but like relationships, boyfriends, things like that, later on, they would say, it's weird. Like, I can't do that anymore. I can't, um, communicate with spirits anymore. Or I can't, which I'm sure they could.
Mhm.
But I haven't decided if it's kind of like the mind over matter thing became codependent on thinking that I was the one causing that gift because it happened when they were in my energy, or because technically anybody can do any of those things. It just comes easier to
Mhm.
empaths, I guess, and I mean, in my opinion. So, or do you think that it is an actual transference of our gifts? As you said, in the opposite way. I know when I touch people, when I shake someone's hand, I often see things that eh, you know, and not even on purpose. But if
Mhm.
there's an
Mhm.
extreme feeling of shame or anger or pain or anything, I'll see that automatically.
I've actually, it's funny, I've been watching this really, really stupid series on Hulu called, I think it's just called, it's maybe it's called Maggie or Maggie the Psychic, but it's about this girl who's got psychic abilities, and every time she touches somebody, she gets these visions, but usually it's in relation to her own relationship with them and everything. And as you
Oh,
were
that's
talking about that, I
interesting.
was like, oh yeah, it's like you touch this person and you see things, and sometimes you
Mhm.
actually see your thing. I my thought is that, those of us who are more awake, for lack of a better term, or more sensory aware, tend to awaken that or activate that within other people. And so I think we do that. I also think that with some of these people where they're like, no, I don't have that ability, I would imagine that it's more about, it's kind of almost like like, I'm sort of imagining it's not that they don't have the ability, but that it's not as much of a priority anymore now that you're not reminding them of it. And so it's kind of like you were the person who always bought the quinoa, and now that they're doing their own grocery shopping, they don't think to buy the quinoa. Like
Oh,
it's
that's
that,
true.
and so I think because it does involve a certain amount of care and feeding to maintain a good, clean channel. And when information, some of us cannot help information coming through, but there are a lot of people who are better at compartmentalizing or pushing it down, where they can kind of go back to turning the volume down and not really paying attention if there isn't somebody around where it's like the volume has been turned up and they are noticing it.
Hmm, that makes sense. Yeah, especially I'm also, I became a after Lyme disease, I became a personal trainer and things like that. So yes, I'm the one that's like, because I have to be, otherwise I'll go back into remission of that,
Mhm,
the healthy
mhm.
eating and the plus I 100% back then I didn't know that. I just thought I became a trainer, mostly by default to heal myself. But I didn't realize back then how much energy, um, negative and positive, and I've talked about this on my show before too. Objects carry, uh,
Mhm,
wood,
mhm,
um, food,
mhm.
basically your clothes. That's what I was saying. If you're wearing something, even unintentionally, that was created by a child in a sweatshop in another country, then that's going to have negative energy, or
Absolutely.
and so that's when I was talking about like grandma's cookies, everybody you can give that recipe out to whoever you want, and they will never be the same because her energy and love was like no one else, and so I think I mean it took me a long time to understand that. Was it the same with you, when people meet you and say, wow, I wish I had that ability. I wish I could do. I don't think it's kind of like the internet, people don't see what goes into all of this beforehand.
Well, and I think that so much of it is, there's the natural innate ability. Like, one thing I do believe is that in the same way that I am not made to be an NBA player, and I will absolutely never in this lifetime be skilled as a basketball player. And even if I practice every single day for the rest of my life as somebody who is literally 5 foot and 3/4 of an inch, there is no way, and especially being like a postmenopausal woman of a certain age, there is no way I will ever, 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 ever be an NBA player. I do believe that there are those of us who are more predisposed towards the sensitivity and toward these abilities than other people are. But I also believe that, and you've been talking about it, that there's also an amount of learning how to care for our channel so that the information that is coming through good and clean, and we are not getting gummed up with our emotional distress. Because I've also seen people where they're utterly convinced that what they are picking up on is psychic information, when really what it is a projection of their fear. And
Hmm.
years ago, I had a situation with somebody I knew whose kid had basically gone on walkabout and had blown their curfew to go stay with friends and get stoned all night.
Oh.
And this person was absolutely convinced that their kid, they had visions of the child dead in a ditch. Like, they were convinced that the child was dead. Well, we are now talking probably 13 or 14 years later, and he's still alive. He's a young adult now, still likes getting stoned. But the thing was,
Yeah.
this person was convinced they were having a premonition when the truth is they were just really, really anxious for a very good reason. But they were picking up, like they were projecting their anxiety and their fear, and they were doing such a good job of awfulizing that they were convinced that this was truth when it really was just emotion.
And I think that's I did that a lot as a little girl with nightmares.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know. I had dreams of past lives that I didn't know.
Mhm.
2-year-old talking about dying in a sword fight, like, or
Mhm.
or numerous fires and things like that. So I didn't know
Oh,
how to
the
process that.
fires.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
I was terrified of fire when I was a
Yes.
child. Yeah, and the entire educational system where of fire safety was not good for this little like past life burned at the stake empath.
Me
Let's
either.
just say,
I grew up
yeah.
in southern New Mexico where we learned this was, early 80s. We learned
Hmm.
about Smokey the Bear.
Yes,
That's all I mean, it was all around me. Everybody was talking about
everywhere.
forest fires. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was, aside from all of that, then there was the spirits that weren't always pretty. I
Hmm.
didn't always, there were literally monsters under my bed. So I had to process
Mm,
that. I had to
mm.
process that. And I, it's an odd, I really wish, which I've talked to other people about from every country across the globe collaborating into some type of educational system for children. I understand there's private schools and but these things people don't understand how much it affects our lives.
Yeah.
How much it can drive somebody to do something that is not an emotion of their own to
Mhm.
harm another individual. It
Mhm.
can drive people to harming animals, to causing car accidents, to doing all of the and
Mhm.
I'm not trying to make people fear that, but I'm saying that's how important this is. And I think it gets misconstrued all the time as people being possessed or people i- when a lot of it is literally just we're all bouncing, each other's traumas off each other.
We are all bouncing each other's traumas off each other. And, as a species, we have gone through, like, I really believe there was this thing that happened somewhere in the vicinity of about 5,000 years ago when patriarchy started to take over, productivity and empire started to like be the priority. And one of the things that happened was we went from experiencing ourselves as interconnected cells in the body of this planet, knowing that we were of this earth, that we were born of the earth, we would die of the earth in the same way that a cell in our body is born, comes up and die and goes
Mhm.
back down and dies, that we knew we were part of something greater. We did not experience ourselves as individuals. And then
Right.
the great lie happened, the great separation happened, and we started to experience ourselves as other than and separate. And one of the things that I think started to happen was trauma started to get compartmentalized and started to get stuffed down. We've been kicking these cans of patriarchal and like racial trauma down the road for 5,000 years now. And the thing
Oh
is
my
that
goodness, yes.
we we have found there is now evidence that trauma is inherited, that it is passed
Oh,
down in our DNA. And so the thing
absolutely.
is, we cannot escape this. And what I believe is that, and I imagine you do too, is that we've hit critical mass and we can no longer avoid this. And so, as a result, even people who are trying to compartmentalize it are no longer able to effectively compartmentalize it. And more people are awakening to this sensitivity and to the interconnectedness of all of us in the way that, and the fact that trauma is bouncing off,
Mhm.
and especially these last 2.5 years. people are waking up.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so I recently, within the last few months, I've done it um semi-professionally for others for a very long time in researching genealogy,
Mm.
intuitively and professionally. And I had never done it for my own family, and I'm like, that's weird. It's probably I'm sure I was afraid of what I would find. And so one of the first things, because it's the more recent few hundred years, was I found that my family quite literally fought each other in the
Mm.
Civil War,
Mm.
killing each other on that, like, which is crazy to me. I'm like, we were fighting. No wonder our family reunions, it's a thing. And no wonder it's kind of like the Cain and Abel thing. Like my sister and I, um, she hated me. I mean, until she
Mm.
was like moved out of the house, but growing up, and I'm like, why is that? And just like you said, it's generational, it's inherited. It's literally it goes back to I tell kids when trying to explain this, like the difference between cats and dogs, being enemies since the beginning of time. I mean, which now they're obviously not as much, but I lost you there for can you
I
hear
know, we
me?
glitched. Now I can hear you again. Yeah. You were
um
saying cats and dogs since the beginning of time.
Yes, they were always enemies or
Yeah.
perceived as enemies. And so I have, I'm part native, obviously. I have the Celtic,
Mhm.
Irish, and Scottish background as well. A lot of our bloodlines go back to Egypt, obviously. But then also, there were both African slaves and Irish slaves around the Civil War area. So I have all of these um, different cultures which
Mhm.
have fought each other
Mhm.
actually.
Mhm.
Some of them still to this day. And
Yeah.
so I thought it was interesting when I got Lyme disease and things like that, and with the two different DNAs and stuff. And I tell people, I the way I understood it from the outside, we have to heal the inner wars before we can heal the outer ones. But my body don't if they can't like learn to get along in this planet of Trish, then they will literally kill each other. And that doesn't
Mhm.
serve any of
Mhm.
them. Then I get Lyme
Mhm.
disease, then I get these immune suppressant diseases, then my blood, everything else goes to hell. So
Yeah.
all of that and all of my bloodlines have to learn to get along so I can live. and so
Yes. Yes.
and so
Yes. Well, and I love how you're talking about just the awareness of like how when we start merging or thinking about our bloodlines, it's like I know I'm like 80, I'm something ridiculous. Like I call myself Whitey McWhiterson because I am like 81% Celt. Like I have, and then the rest of like I've got a lot of Northern European ancestry. I do have a
mhm,
tiny bit of Native American ancestry, but most of me is just like European. But within that, I mean, I have a lot of Irish ancestry, I have a lot of Scottish ancestry, I have a lot of English ancestry, and it doesn't take all you have to do is like watch the movie Belfast to see that even in 19 like for the 20 years ago the Brits and
yep.
the Irish were fighting with each other like and you're right. There's like these conflicts within our DNA that are impacting us that we are trying to come to terms with, that we're trying to reconcile. And I think your point of how this impacts our health is just so oh God, that's just exquisite. And like I think you're just so onto something there.
Well, and that's, I started thinking about it since I absorbed my twin, literally. And as I said, there's been stories of this since the beginning of time, from the Bible, from so many different fairy tales, myths, legends, the Greek and the Greek gods and goddesses, Egyptian times where two siblings tried to kill each other. And
Mhm.
so that was interesting to me. I'm like, well, okay, so first of all, I've never quite figured out, does the one that the stronger embryo overpowered, I'm sure that was traumatic, at birth. Like
Yeah.
however that developed, I'm sure there's some sort of maybe anger or resentment there. Um, but it's kind of like it reminds me, and I had this epiphany one time, just recently in the last few months actually. It reminds uh-oh. Oh,
Yeah,
wait. Oh,
okay,
maybe.
we're back.
Yeah. The fish that they have that parasite thing, fish maybe. It's a smaller thing, but it's a parasite living on their tongue. It literally becomes their tongue for
Mm.
the bigger fish.
Mhm.
Now, if that smaller fish overeats or doesn't eat or whatever, it will kill the bigger fish. But at the same time, if the bigger fish, it's now a part of that bigger one. So if the bigger fish tries to get rid of the parasite, both of them will also die.
Right. Right.
So that's, when we go back to our ancestors talking about everything being one and this earth and how it because that's how it works. How long are we going to continue fighting not only ourselves but each other until we realize that it all affects us?
It all affects us. Yeah, I mean, the absurdity, and so I want the absurdity of the idea that I can cause harm to another human being and that somehow I'm not going to, like, that the front and the back are not connected. I've
Right.
never understood the ability to compartmentalize, and I actually think some of it is like people who truly believe that, like, this realm of earth is a dress rehearsal for the heavenly kingdom and they're completely separate. And I'm like, all you have to do is really listen to the words on earth as it is in heaven to understand that there is a direct link between heaven and earth. But somehow some people did not get the memo, and I think are just thinking that it's all that there, we aren't interconnected, and that if I do something lousy to somebody else, it's not going to come back to bite me in the butt.
Right.
I want to say it's so fascinating, the conversation we're having. So I was born with two placentas. My mother
Wow.
gave my mother gave birth to me, and my umbilical cord, basically, I had two placentas and essentially an umbilical cord that kind of wrapped around like a double umbilical cord that became one. And I was born with two placentas. As a result, my mother nearly bled out giving birth to me. And so she nearly died giving birth to me. So I basically was born, I believe, sort of, I came in through the outdoor. And so even though I have personally not had a like a textbook near death experience, I was born in the midst of a near death experience. But I don't have the necessarily, we never did a DNA to confirm this, but my sense has always been, once I understood I was born with two placentas, then I'm also an assimilated twin. So I find it so
Yeah.
interesting that you and I are having this conversation. I was like, well, hello, you know, and what I got was that I was
Um,
born 3 weeks early. Yep. Can you hear me?
3 weeks early. Um, and so did that change your zodiac sign?
Yes. I was well, I was actually, so no, I would have probably still have been a Capricorn. I was born right on the cusp of Aquarius and Capricorn, so I was a Capricorn. So it didn't change my zodiac sign, but what it did that was interesting was that, so I have Mars in the 12th house in Leo. And what an astrologer at one point looked at was that apparently, looking at what was going to be happening at the ephemeris, had I been born a few days later, Mars would have gone retrograde. And the theory that some astrologers who I've talked with had, but this one astrologer and I had this conversation, was that my mother, because of the double placenta, probably would not have been able to get through the childbirth if I had been any bigger than I was. So I was
Wow.
born 3 weeks early, and my mom, even though she nearly died because she nearly hemorrhaged to death, she survived my birth. And so the theory is that if I had been born any later because of the Mars retrograde, it would have been very problematic. And
Right.
I believe that I probably would have been a fraternal twin with a brother, because I was looking for this person for the first 32 years of my life. I felt like there was the missing piece. I was like, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you?
Yes.
And I just got chills as I said that. I mean, the loneliness and the feeling of like,
Yes.
I cannot find you. I know you. And I have another friend who's also a healer who had a twin sister who did not get born. But with my brother, what I believe happened was that we understood the peril for my mom, and they also decided that this particular incarnation was not what they wanted. And so I don't believe that I assumed that I assimilated them from a place of malevolence. I believe what happened was they checked out. Like they're somewhere in
Mm.
the early part of the first trimester, they went, I'm out of here. Thanks for the fish. And I was left with this. I basically was left to sort of assimilate all of this. And I was basically left there because it allowed my mother to survive my birth and then the subsequent births of
Wow.
my siblings. So I actually do not believe that I did anything, that there was any kind of Cain and Abel action going on as much as it was. And I know other people, like this other friend of mine, they did not lose their sibling because because of malevolence. They lost their sibling because she could not bear to be born into the world right now and opted to not come planet side.
Well, so and I don't know. I'm assuming this came from my father's trauma. He had 8 brothers and sisters and they lived on a farm, and his mom, would have a child and get right back to working without skipping a beat because that's how amazing women were. We think we have it hard, but
Mhm.
so my sister, I have an older sister, and so when my mom found out she was pregnant with me, my dad panicked, of course, and said, "Oh, I don't want any more kids. I don't want." So my sister was planned, I was not, of course. And I think it was then because he had such an emotional reaction to not wanting another child. Um I think that been where I'm back.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're back. I heard you say that Ben, or that would have been.
Oh, I think that would have caused, uh, I don't know, had my other half, or maybe it would have caused my mom health problems. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
But what
Mhm.
happened? It's interesting you say that your twin checked out because I did the same thing up until 4 years ago. So I was 30, what, 7, I guess, 4 years ago. I was 37 years old. Searched all my life. Thought I had a part of myself missing, quite literally.
Yep.
And after that last, well, not the last one, but that heart attack that year I had. After that heart attack, it's like she wanted to show me that it was okay. That, like, gosh, I'm getting emotional. So I was at this bridge and I was so sad. I was sitting there and I was oh, I was sitting by a tree stump, and this bridge, all of a sudden, my entire scenery changed, the whole psychic thing that happens. And in spirit form, my other half, my twin, came to me and grabbed my hand, like I'm coming back, And so, um, it was something that people had told me, other psychics, other, my energy back then, which I didn't know was even in the realm of possibilities in this world, was reaching people on the other side of the world, quite literally.
Mm.
Um, and I used to be extremely religious back then, and so I had just gotten into reading tarot cards. I was searching for answers everywhere in every other religion. And there was a tarot reader, just general collective, that I it was around Christmas, and I was wearing something very specific. I'm weird anyways. I had like the craziest skirt on. I had some leggings that had like sleigh all day on them. I had bells and a, you know, weird colored shirt, all these things. I was sitting on a rock staring at this lake. She described that to a T,
Mm.
and she was somewhere in Europe at the time. And of
Mhm.
course, me, for my not very awakened mind back then, still probably not, but I was like, no, that's not even possible. She's talking to millions of people. Surely there's how many others that are sitting on a rock on this day wearing these crazy leggings and has the side of their head shaved and has red hair, and I'm trying to logically, I guess, rationalize all these things. And she said, you've been looking for your twin that's been within you and with you all along. And so it was at that moment, it made sense. And, which is interesting because my uterus is heart shaped and completely split
Mm.
down the middle. So
Wow.
it's like
Wow. So she
I
really
carried
is
my
with
daughter
you.
on one side and my son on the other side.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, in my case, I believe that my twin incarnated a couple years later, and I believe that I actually found him in this lifetime when I
Wow.
was in my 30s. And it was like I set eyes on him, and because this twin was also somebody that wasn't just a sibling, they had been a beloved, and we had multiple life history of like being ripped away from each other.
Mhm.
And so I took one look at this man, I set eyes on him with his baby in his arm, and it was truly love at first sight. It was just spectacular, and it was incredibly complicated, because they were married, had a toddler, it was just a situation. And we eventually, they were, hippy dippy open relationship pagan, and so eventually we ended up connecting, and I was able to work through the connection and meet that person, and eventually, like, I got to the place where like things sort of just, it was not going to work out in this lifetime. There were just too many complicated factors, but I was able to release the karmic bond, and I was able to be like, I no longer need to search for you. I no longer need
Mhm.
to look for you. I have found you. I no longer know your name. I no longer know your smell. I no longer know you. Go with God, do your thing. I love you. I forgive you. I release you, but let's just stop looking for each other, because we've never been able to stay together. It has always gone horribly awry. Let's just call it a game. Like, let's cash in our chips now and go home. And it was after that experience that I actually was able to find the man that I've been married to. We'll be celebrating our 21st wedding anniversary in September, because I
Wow.
was no longer looking for that karmic connection anymore. And I didn't have that feeling of desperation. So, because I do not like, it was not like their soul was part of me. They really were gone.
Yeah, and that's absolutely how, I went through bouts of depression
Oh,
and
yeah.
so many times in my life. and trying to fill voids,
Yeah.
with different vices and all these things that I didn't understand. Um, a lot of those times, repeating the same cycles over and over and over and over and over, as I had realized and recognized I had been doing for God knows centuries.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, "No, just this, if this is my last chance on this planet, on this earth, in a shell of a human being, it's not going to end that way this time." You know, you have to, I think we come to, finally, after how many centuries or however long, we get to a point where we're tired, and you you just, and it's not, when people say, I read that, well, and you mentioned it earlier, when people say let it go, or you let things, it's not that we let it go, it's an acceptance.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's I, I tell people all this all the time, because I used to box and be in roller derby and stuff. And I was explaining to my son, like when he was in football, the same type of, I said, it's about that push and pull in life, and with anything you're searching for, with anything you're trying to heal, it's not about, people say let yourself fall and learn how to get up and all the, no, we learn how to we learn how to take a hit. We learn how to respond to that. I know that now I bounce back much easier from things than I would have probably a few lifetimes ago. Obviously.
Mhm.
Some of
Mhm.
those things would have killed me as a
Yeah.
child, for that matter.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, what was your derby name?
oh, lost cause, because I'm from, the Wizard of Oz here in Kansas. So it was like K-OZ, play on words,
Oh, that's awesome.
Oz,
I
because
was
I lived in New York at the time.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I was never a roller girl, but I know a lot of people in roller, and I always had my fantasy roller derby name. I would have been Jen Oside, except that I would have been like, instead of or CIDE, I would have been like SIDDH, like as in the she, as in, which is the one of the, that may be a bastardization of the spelling, but basically it's like one of the Celtic names for the Fae, we folk. But also would have been, I just thought that would have been a really fun roller girl name to be Genocide. But anyway, I it's always roller derby is just such a fascinating adventure in life.
Oh
It's so
man,
neat
I
that you were doing
mean,
that.
absolutely loved it. I'm
Yeah.
considering, at 41 years old now, going out again. Here in like a month or two, maybe. I got injured. I got
Oh yeah.
injured.
Oh yeah. I have seen some of the bruises. Yeah, I've definitely seen some of the bruises, and it is impressive what you can do to
Because those are
yourself.
speed skates.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even if you don't have any contact with anyone, you could still hurt yourself really
Yeah.
bad,
Yeah.
really badly. Um, but I think that's life.
Yeah.
We don't have to have other people to blame all of our, all everything we do to ourselves. It's like
Right.
witches getting a bad rap. Half the time we curse ourselves. We're not out there
Absolutely.
cursing anybody else. We
Mm-mm.
curse ourselves by the way we talk to ourselves, by the way we treat ourselves.
Oh, and
You
as
know.
women, especially, I mean, the
Oh.
amount of self-negation and the amount of negativity and
Mhm.
all of the ways that we are. And, yesterday I taught a level 1 EFT training all this weekend. And I had a bunch of different, as I was working with my students, one of the things I was just so struck by is how, especially when our body is going through a challenge and going through illness or sickness or disease, how much we hate on ourselves, like how
Mhm.
little mercy we have for ourselves, how much we tell our bodies that they're being wrong, how often we tell ourselves that, like that we're broken.
Mhm.
And I believe that our bodies are always, always, always trying to look out for us, that our bodies are always trying to keep us safe. I personally, for me, Lyme disease was absolutely a great awakener and was absolutely a boundary setter for me. And what I have found is that, like, it never failed that if I started to vacillate on my purpose and especially on my boundaries and my limitations and like the I'm not going there, never failed. I would find it, I'd like a tick would be embedded on me again. And I mean,
Oh,
I can't
yeah.
even count the number of times that I've been on Doxy because I mean, I live in Maine. We are one of the epicenters for Lyme disease.
Yes.
I was actually going to say earlier, and then we talked about something else, but in my family, nuclear family of 9, 7 of us have had either chronic or acute Lyme disease. And my thing is, I just imagine probably the other 2 just never got diagnosed with it. But we also have gene mutations that make us substantially more susceptible to Lyme disease.
Well, yes. And I didn't, as humans, we have the capability to heal ourselves from anything. 100% from anything there is. We were born with that. It is within us. We just don't have that faith. So, I guess when, as a single mom, when I had Lyme disease, I still worked full time. Um I had both my kids pretty much alone, in hospitals and things like that. And so I I went blind. I for a while, I lost my hearing for a while. I lost my ability to speak for a while. So I lost all of my senses
Mm,
um, there for a while. And so I became very depressed. Most people don't realize that Lyme disease mimics so many other diseases. So it has one of the highest suicide rates as well because it
mhm.
not all you're cognitively losing your mind. Like
Yes.
they said I had less than 1% chance to live with the white lesions on my brain. And it had spread to so I had cardiac Lyme and I had neural Lyme with the meningitis.
Mm,
And
mm,
so the doctor said, we there's nothing we can do, Trish. You either make it or you don't. And I, of course, am hard headed. I was like, it was that trigger word, I'm like, oh no, I am not dying today.
mm-mm,
Okay, again,
mm-mm.
like I am not. And so I changed everything. But one of the most pivotal moments of my life to this day, not only with Lyme, but in changing my perspective in everything else, was when I heard about a woman who was diagnosed with Lyme, and they gave her a few weeks to live. And so she went to California. She, was going to live out her life there, and she was attacked by a swarm of killer bees, and she experienced like 24 hours of the worst pain she'd ever had in her life. And then after that, she was 100% cured from everything. So all this time, when that negative self-talk, all that time when I was like, now I've gone blind, now I've gone deaf, now I was being stung by wasp in the middle of winter. I've been bitten by a brown recluse and a black widow. And all this time, I used to get stung by bees all the time growing up. I have red hair. And so here I was playing the whole woe is me, blah, blah. And I said they weren't trying to kill me. They
Mm-mm.
were trying to heal me.
Mhm.
Because now it's known that bee venom is
Mhm.
one of the cure, not a cure, but um helps with Lyme. So the poison is the cure. So now, can you, speaking of hearing and the the audio goes out,
I know.
and my seeing, when I regained my vision, I could almost see in infrared and ultraviolet. And
Wow.
they say when you lose things, like even when you have near death experience, you start using other parts of your brain,
Mhm.
so I think those senses were heightened because
Mhm.
I lost
Mhm.
them. And so it changed. Then I'm like, oh my God, now all of these animals sacrificed themselves to save me. So it completely went from me being the victim to seeing the other side, and it changed my entire life in that
Mm.
minute.
Mm. I'm just sitting with the magnitude of that and
It's
just yeah.
and that's when they did my blood test to prove, because here's another thing, I don't know if you're this way, but as an empath, I still I'm working on it, trusting my intuition, trusting my everything, but I'm still one of those have to see it to believe it type people.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So then they went back and did blood tests, said, "Oh, well, you had Rocky Mountain spotted fever when you were little. You had, um, you know, all these probably Lyme disease from the time you were, but just didn't know it." So
Right.
then I thought, like, literally all these incidences, I thought back to
Yeah.
that something bit me or that something happened to me, and I'm like, that they weren't trying to kill me,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, and it's profound.
Yeah.
Um, I survived not being in a car accident last week because a brown recluse that I allowed to live on my porch for the last few months ran inside last moment and delayed me, and I accidentally stepped on her.
Oh.
But when I got on the highway, it was about 5 to 10 minutes prior. There was a horrible car accident, and so I was telling I was telling my listeners. I said everything happens for a reason. And so
Mhm.
I no longer get mad at spilled milk over spilled milk.
Right. Right.
I'm not
Right.
getting mad when a spider's in my house because she it, she wasn't trying to kill me.
Mm-mm.
She was stalking, and so nothing nothing we're always in the exactly the right place at exactly the right time.
Yes. I think that is, I think that that is there's something so there is a part of my soul that absolutely knows that to be true, and then it's so funny how the ego jumps back in and
Oh,
starts going, like, and I grew up in a family of like, I grew up with atheists in my family. I grew up with
mhm.
skeptics. I grew up with people who are just like, if you couldn't see it, it wasn't real. So I totally get the you need to see it to believe it. And I love how you're talking about, like, these little things where if you just look at it, it's like just these little events that just protect us and keep us exactly where we need to be, and really are designed, like, I know for me, even I have no idea when I first got Lyme disease. Like, I have no idea. As I look back, there's strong indications that I probably had it for a much longer time than I knew. Um, but I look at when it became a really acute problem for me, and I see what an agent of change it was, how profoundly it transformed my life. I
Mhm.
would not be having this conversation with you right now. I would not be on this podcast
No.
if it were not for the fact that the Lyme disease basically caused me to pivot my entire life and move away from and all the things that were in even remotely misaligned. Like, I had a thriving brick and mortar business. I was doing fantastically, but I could feel that I was outgrowing it, and I could feel that it was no longer where I belonged, and it was time for me to stop doing this work. And Lyme disease was the wake up call that really allowed me to say, I know I'm here to do something different. And I had a couple weeks where I was just so flat on my butt because I basically got it. I got, because ticks often carry mycoplasma pneumonia as well. So I
Mhm.
basically my the manifestation of my Lyme came through as Lyme induced pneumonia, and like bad mycoplasma, and just really, I mean, I wasn't hospitalized, but like I was so exhausted that I thought watching Beyond the Valley of the Dolls movie on TV was actually interesting. And
I haven't
if you've
seen.
ever watched it, it is one of the most boring, schlocky movies from the 1960s you'll ever find. Like, I was that out of it, that like that was my pacing and that was my speed. but within a couple, like I basically like slept through a couple weeks, but I did this thing where I would like sleep on the I would sleep for a couple days, and then I would rally, I'd get a little bit of energy, and I'd make myself go to work. And then I would just like, all I could do was just show up, go to work, and then drag my ass home because I was so tired and I was so exhausted.
Mhm.
But we live in a society that's just kind of like, hey, you got to keep on, bringing home the bacon. You got to keep on doing these things. But
Yeah.
eventually, it just became like my body, my soul was like, you're made for something better than this. You don't have to keep on ignoring and denying what your body is asking for. And so I have definitely seen that illness and even accidents are so frequently our soul, body and soul's attempts at setting boundaries when we are unwilling to set them for ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just about to say that's one of the biggest things that any accident or lightning strike or any of those things, but especially Lyme disease has taught me is to love myself more
Yes. Yeah.
because in all of those moments I'm like, why are you going back to this job that is killing you? You know,
Mhm.
when I went back, I was working in a casino as a dealer, but I worked the grave shift, which is horrible for someone with a with an immune suppressant disease, you know, and
Yeah.
an empath because
Yeah.
that's a terrible
Oh,
environment to. So I was literally, and I'm like, why do you keep doing these things? You know
mm,
better. You
right.
survived it how many times? You keep going back, and I'm like, that's probably what our angels, guides, you know, whatever you believe in, it's like us looking at our own children or our pets or anything. We're like, we try to show them tough love because by coddling and doing and always handing like here's the universe. Okay, I always heal you. I save you from all these stupid things. You put yourself in that position. You made that choice. And yet we keep doing it. And they're
Yeah.
like, how many times am I going to have to strike this girl with lightning to get her to, you know, and so when I think about with my kids or animals or anything, and I'm like, just stop. You know, it's so obvious to someone from the outside. Um, and but it's really that process of loving myself more, and once I did that, people are like, "Wow, Trish, what you do? Like, your skin looks great, your hair, your" I mean, I look younger now than I did back probably 15 years ago when I was in a
Mhm.
horribly abusive relationship,
Mhm.
working at a job that was 12 hours a day that didn't appreciate me. You know what I mean? Like, all these things, and that's the difference because I love myself now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I also just like having mercy for ourselves and compassion for ourselves when we miss the mark, when we slip away, when we make those decisions, when we eat the cheese curls, when we, when we do something where we are like, I know I shouldn't do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Like even that, like approaching ourselves with just profound love and mercy, and not giving ourselves like there's a reason we opt to do the things that are not wise, and
Mhm.
usually we're doing it because part of us is stressed, part of us is hurting, part of us just wants relief. And we were one of the things we're learning, I was teaching my students to tap on, is food cravings yesterday. And the thing about the way that EFT works with food cravings is that it really invites you to honor the desire and honor the part of you that wanted that thing, and lean into it, as opposed to leaning away from it and going into this idea of being a good girl and
Right.
deprivation. And I think that even when we make the decision to do something that is harmful to ourselves, there's always a part of us that is trying to find a solution. And maybe like there's a part of us that doesn't have the self-esteem to stand up for ourselves. Maybe there's a part of us that's just like, the path of least resistance is saying yes to these people right now. The path of least resistance is being a people pleaser right now. The path of least resistance is deciding to have that, like, that thing on my plate that I know is not good for me. And instead of just like constantly coming back with that sort of like self-flagellating, like, look at you, you did this thing, like, even that, like, it's like loving the abuser within ourselves instead of abusing the abuser within ourselves, like, all of the layers at which we can have mercy and compassion for the choices we make as human beings.
And I think that, it's probably 4 or 5 years ago now, uh, when life coaches and health coaches and all of these things started becoming, well, not only necessary, but a really big deal. I think unintentionally, to some extent, many coaches are doing such a great disservice to people. I mean, not intentionally, by creating this, like you said, this frame of mind, this perception that you have to be positive 100% of the time.
Mm,
You have to be a good person 100% of the time. We're human.
we
We
are
are
human. We
human.
are
You
human.
know, I still get get upset and react once in a while in traffic.
Right.
I still, no matter how much I work on it, and I know better, I still eat cupcakes and I still do these. I know that it's going to make my muscles and bones and joints and everything else in my soul hurt. I know it, and I still want that cupcake. I still do
Yeah.
it anyways.
And some days you just have to do that. I was having a conversation with somebody about the whole thing of like this kind of the phenomenon of always focusing on the positive, always focusing
Mhm.
on the positive. And the thing is with EFT, basically, well facilitated EFT always acknowledges the distress and where we are at before we try to use tapping to bring in something positive. But one of the fears that certain people who are kind of on that kind of law of attraction, whatever you think about is what you're going to amplify,
Right.
will be like, well, if I talk about the negative stuff, then won't I grow it bigger? And what I really believe is that, number one, if there is even a remote part of you that is feeling distressed or disorganized, like unhappy or having negative thoughts, no amount of positive affirmation is going to make that part of you go away. And to ignore and deny that part allows it to fester within us. I really believe what we resist persists,
Yes.
and what we shed light on burns off like fog in the morning hours. Like, it really makes a
Yeah.
difference. And but the thing is that when we, start getting into this whole like positive thinking, positive thinking, positive thinking, just keep thinking positive. And also the people who are like, it's not working at all, but they're like, I just
Mhm.
have to keep on going. Sometimes that's a sign that it's time to course correct. Sometimes that's a
Yeah.
sign to say something is wrong with the way you're doing this and you need to change it. But I really think of the positive affirmations like when you're dealing with something really big and intense and painful, it's kind of like having a big old pile of poop and trying to spray perfume all over it. It's like, it's not going to make it better. And if we have those feelings inside of us, we must like bring them out and acknowledge them in order
Confront
for
them.
them to transmute and
Yeah.
change. Yeah.
And that's when I really went back to my pagan roots, the as above, so below, as within, so without,
Mhm.
because that balance, everything in this universe has that balance. We have the northern and the southern hemispheres. We have, so we have the light part of the year and the dark part of the year. It has been that way, a perfect geometrical balance by design.
Yeah.
Um, since the beginning of since its creation.
Right.
So, but we have to honor that. We have to accept that. We
Right.
have to I love that. That's why I had gotten the Four Seasons tattoos, to remind me to embrace. I know that I notoriously I had a heart attack on the same day 2 Septembers in a row, you know,
Wow.
and so I know now that I need to be more gentle with myself in the fall. I need to be and so these things have happened. That it's your biorhythm, and the earth and animals and all of the elements and everything in this massive beautiful creation of our existence is built that way. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
for for people in this narcissistic world that we live in to say there's only one diet that works. There's only one way to heal yourself. There's only one way to be a good person or be happy or be positive or what. No.
Mm-mm.
No.
Mm-mm.
And I think that's where it, it's like we're going to take it's like Common Core math. I mean, we're taking we tried to take shortcuts, which is just going to prolong our suffering in other areas because of misinformation. But
Right.
but that's
Right.
again, we have to accept that because that's equally growth.
Well, and
That's
you're speaking about seasons, and we are living in such a bizarre time because of electricity, because of central heating, because of the fact that we can, buy food from South America or Australia. We
hmm
have this artificial sense of summer and like all the time. And
yes.
as a society, we are like even the whole sort of entrepreneurial exponential growth idea that every like the goal should be that you're like growing your business and making more money every single year. Like this idea of just grow, 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 grow. What else? Just like what the only other thing that grows and grows and grows and grows unchecked is cancer. And
Yeah.
we as a society right now are living in this really disconnected from the reality of seasons and the reality of the rhythms of life. And it's like there is a fallow period where things need to rest. There is a period where things go deep underground and hibernate and form themselves. There is a period of like gathering up the energy to sprout. There is the period of growth and receiving the nourishment. And only after that does the fruit appear that we can have the harvest and we can have the bounty. And then we go back into the fallow season. But we are living in a time with artificial light, with artificial growth cycles, with all of these things that make people forget that it's almost like we deny gravity. Like we are just
Yes.
we're defying the laws of gravity as a species right now. And I believe it is coming back to bite us in the butt in a
Oh,
major
absolutely.
way. Yeah.
And it's funny you speak of, the seasons and the blooming and stuff. Uh, In 2018, um the height of my Lyme disease, the worst part when I thought I was dying and all that was Christmas Eve. And because of all these things in my health, and I was about to be evicted from my house, and all these things went downhill, and I just wanted to give up on everything. I didn't want to end my life. I was tired. I wanted to
Mhm.
give up. I'm
Mhm.
like, I can't do this. I cannot do this. My power went out at
Mm.
1:11 a.m. on Christmas Eve.
Wow.
My TV comes on after the power went out in the middle of the night, and there was a song. I'll have to send you the link, but it was Jennifer Hudson and three other girls on The Voice singing "The Rose" by Bette Midler.
Oh.
The soul afraid of dying that never learns to live.
Mm. Mm.
And I was like, if that isn't because roses have been, I was born in June, of course, a Gemini. Not only am I a twin, but I'm also a twin. And that song. And so when I moved and got the courage to start my business and leave those jobs and everything 2 years ago, I had this rose from that house. I had moved different town, everything. I had to live with my parents for a short period of time. They had the rose dead in their garage. So last
Mm.
summer, I thought, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna start my photography business. I'm gonna finally get out there and do. Everybody said I'd never make anything of myself as an artist or a photographer, and my parents are like, I went home one time and I said, oh, I'm gonna take this home. And they're like, why? Just for the planter? That rose has been dead for years. I brought it home, and it was spring. 2 years later, after that Christmas, and that's when I opened my studio, my art studio, and I had it on my back patio. I was actually going to repot something in it because I thought it was dead. And the first picture I took was the rose bloomed. It rebloomed.
Wow.
So then I went on doing all this research on roses and how they can actually you can cut the head off of a rose, plant it. I mean a stem, like not
Mhm.
even rooted anymore,
Mhm.
and it can regrow.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden Morticia Adams made so much sense.
Mm. Mm. Yes.
I'm like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
You are giving, yeah. Mm. Yeah, I have
profound time.
I'm looking at dried roses in front of me, and I adore roses. I've got Rosa rugosa growing everywhere, and we Rosa multiflora, which is wild rose that is considered an invasive, but just volunteered itself and started blooming in my yard a couple years ago.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, roses are just, and roses are associated with the Blessed Mother. Like they are one
Mhm.
of the biggest symbols of the goddess. They, and the heart. So what a
And it's,
spectacular story.
and rose, they're not actually flowers, they're fruit, right?
Yeah.
I think. So it's like literally that fruit, that seed you plant.
Yeah.
Um, Always like never give up. I mean, even though something might look like it's dying or dead, which was symbolic of myself that night when that song came on. Um, and I had written a poem back in high school, um, called "The Rose," and it was about life and death.
Mm.
Um,
You'll have to
and
include that
so
poem in the show notes for this
yeah, yeah, I've never I and it was it,
if you can find
something
it.
that no, no, I memorized. I mean, it was something that didn't make sense back then. I mean, it was a really pretty poem back then, but I didn't realize the significance until now. And oh my gosh, I cannot believe it is already 10 o'clock. I'm gonna
I
have to have you
know.
back on again so you can talk.
Oh,
We didn't
you and I could talk forever. I
even.
mean, seriously, it is kind of like, oh, you, hi, been a couple hundred years, but hey. Yeah.
I want to share. I just read. I was in a hurry before the show, which is also symbolic. But my yogi tea, which always has a message,
Mm-hmm.
on the tag, says,
Mm-hmm.
"What can you appreciate in this moment?"
Mm.
And that was it. So, oh man, Jen, yeah, yeah, you're welcome to come back.
I
Well,
would
anytime.
love to come back, and I would absolutely love to bring you on my show as well. So I
Absolutely.
guess
Nobody
I'll
ever wants to
continue.
talk to me.
Oh, I mean, come
um,
on. We're both assimilated twins. I
yes,
mean, now
that's
that is
crazy, isn't it?
wild. And I have never, ever, in all of the podcasts that I've been on, I've never had this conversation. I've never, and I'm just like, because this is just such a very, like, really weird and random piece of info. Like it's not like most people start talking about being assimilated twins. So
Yeah, it doesn't happen,
yeah,
and so,
yeah,
uh, it's like finding a needle in a haystack, you know?
yeah.
Um, yes, so next I do have some people booked the weeks after Not next week, I don't. So I'm open next week if you want to come back. My viewers and listeners, next Monday is open. You don't have to answer now if you don't want to,
Okay.
or you can. I mean, either way.
Well, my
But
husband would basically be like, "No, you are not doing this because we're taking 2 weeks off, and I am a notorious workaholic." And he, on the other hand,
yes,
is he's my boundaries when I don't have them. And so he has been like, "You are not doing any work." And this week I'm actually doing a ton of things. So I will gratefully say I'd love to when I'm not on vacation, and I would absolutely
absolutely.
love to come back. Yeah.
We can plan a time in the future where you can actually talk. I apologize.
We can
Where
talk
you can
about
talk
being highly
about
sensitive, empathic, and all those fun things. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
It's such an odd. I don't meet a lot. I meet a lot of mediums and psychics and such, but it is different. As
It
you
is
said, it's
different.
very different for
It is
empaths.
very different. And many of us can learn to cultivate the abilities so that we can use them as a psychic, we can use them as a medium, but
Yes,
we have to deal but, you gotta deal with the poop. Like, you gotta deal with and you gotta learn
yes.
how to navigate that sensitivity before you can really use your gifts effectively.
Oh yes. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. I'm still.
Yeah.
I'm a work in progress, people.
Oh,
I
yeah. I will be a
man.
work in progress in this life and probably
Oh
in the next.
Lord.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Next time we talk, remind me to tell you about where I grew up. I grew up in the mountains of southwestern Mexico, but I learned about a tribe that resonated with me, but that's been discovered to be they were around like 30,000 years
Mm.
uh, ago. So that's an interesting story. Um, yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Jen. Where can people find you?
So people can find me in a couple different places. Really, really simple. Come on over to empathicmastery.com. And also, if you want to get a copy of my empathic safety guide, go over to empathicsensitivity.com. And that's also going to
Yes,
bring you,
my,
yes.
my
And
ink
that's
was out, so it's not
Oh,
actually pink,
cool.
but
Oh, very cool. And the thing that's really cool about that too is that that will also give you access to my free Facebook group where I teach master classes every single month. I do Tap Along Tuesday once a month and Tarot Tuesday once a month. And when we have things like Lionsgate or, when we had the 22222, we do alignment and calibration ceremonies. And it's a place where you just get to come and be with other people who really get it. And to get a copy of my book, just jump on over to empathicmasterybook.com. At this point in time, this big bad boy, which is 380 pages, you can get it in ebook, like Kindle copy. You can get it as an audiobook. You can get it as a hardcover, like nice and hard, or you can also get it as a paperback at empathicmasterybook.com. And for the people who are interested in learning about EFT, you can jump on over to eftinstruction.com. But if this is all really overwhelming, I'm sure that Trish is putting it into the show notes right now. But just jump on over to empathicmastery.com and it will lead you to all the rest.
yes, I will have those links on my Facebook page, on the YouTube page. Um, and I know it's overwhelming
Yeah. Yeah.
overwhelming for people, but
It is,
um,
it is. Well, and something I heard the other day, it used to be that we could retain 7 pieces of information at any given point in time. But with sort of the onset of all the trauma with this pandemic, we now as human beings can hold about 4 pieces of information at a given point in time. So we really need to keep it simpler. It also occurred to me for anybody who actually wants to at some point catch the interview that you and I are going to do. My podcast is called The Empathic Mastery Show, and the link for that is empathicmasteryshow.com.
and I will say, so I was talking about this right before you came on. I absolutely love, and this is saying a lot because I don't. I know it's bad, but I'll be the first to admit I don't always read a lot of emails like newsletters and stuff, but
Mhm.
I absolutely love yours. They are
Oh,
filled with so much useful information. Um, it's amazing. You take so much time and energy to put those out. So,
oh,
and that
thank
that
you.
absolutely comes across in your emails. So, yes, absolutely. Subscribe to those so you all can get Jen's amazing wisdom and knowledge. And a lot of it, obviously, people are searching and for
Yeah.
tools and help. And so I think it's amazing what you're
Oh,
doing.
oh,
You're absolutely an inspiration.
oh,
And I'm going to
Trish,
learn.
thank you so much.
I know nothing about, surprisingly, just because that overload of information thing in the last few years. I don't know anything about EFT. So this is exciting
Oh.
to me. I'm also,
Oh, just you
you know,
wait. Just you wait. It's a little weird at first because it looks really strange because we're tapping on the top of our head and all kinds of like it like if and I
I,
will be completely honest, my first experience with it, it was like I was a little too vain to do it. But it works like nothing else. And in the more than 30 years that I've been working as an energy healer and a psychic and doing all this work, I have never found a tool that is more gentle, that is more efficient, that is more effective and is more able to deal with whatever we throw at it. So I welcome to my world and welcome to the power of EFT because it really is just spectacular. You don't have to believe in it. It works whether you believe in it or not. And it's really quite remarkable, remarkable thing. Trish, it has been such a delight. Like, this is clearly a divine appointment.
yes.
I mean, clearly a divine appointment. And as you were talking about people sort of that psychically being led to each other, this completely feels like that was what happened here. And I'm so glad you reached out. It has been such an honor to be on your show.
eh, Thank you. And likewise, um I have to tell people I'm intuitively led to people that I interview. It's not about what I think the public wants or my audience or anything. I literally go out because people are like, "Well, how'd you find them? Was it just some like lottery list?" Or no, I I'm here. It's the missing piece, which is personal to me. So I was thinking the other day, I'm like, man, and that's the ego. And of course, I drove up and there's this giant semi that said super ego, and I took a picture of that because I'm like, thank you, universe, of course. But because here I am, the whole man, where do I go? I'm kind of lost. What do I do? I don't have any information. We get in these, and I'm like, what are you talking? Look at all of the people you have interviewed and every one of them is a teacher of something different that I needed in my
Mm-hmm.
life. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's absolutely amazing how that works out because absolutely divine timing. Real quick, I was going to mention because I forgot and I have ADHD,
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
sign thing from the universe.
And definitely, interestingly, another thing that those of us with particular gene mutations are very, very susceptible to.
Yes.
And actually, I've got a show coming up fairly soon that's going to be all about the interface between empaths and ADHD because there's definitely a correlation there.
And
Yeah.
Lyme exacerbates ADHD.
Oh,
And then,
yes.
and I've often correlated empaths and people with highly sensitive or people that are highly sensitive. Um, you know, I'm also categorized as autistic. Well,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of these things, I think it's society, it's because I tried to fit in this box of
Yeah.
how I'm supposed to be all my life
Yeah.
that creates that turmoil. So, um, but one thing I was going to tell you because you also have Lyme is one time I was asking you, I'm like, I just need something to help me with this, something to cure it, something to heal it. And I kept getting scratched by my cat, and I'm like, she has never scratched anyone in her entire life. I rescued her, and cat's claw.
Cat's claw.
Cat's
Yes.
claw is
Yes.
an
Yes.
herb.
Yes.
So here's another one of those things. The universe is like, hello.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing that saved my life, that I really believe completely changed things, was that I was part of and starting to do research, and I was part of, like some of the online Facebook groups and Lyme recovery groups. And people started talking about using Rife machines, which is a frequency, like basically broadcasting frequencies, radio frequencies into your body.
Oh,
And and Spirit was like, "You have to get one of these. This will save you." And I then went and I looked, and the prices are like, they're not cheap. We're talking a couple grand to even get started with a good Rife machine. And Spirit was like, do you want to run up like a couple $1,000s on your credit card, or do you want to be dead? Like they were just like,
yeah.
we'll keep it simple for you. You get to choose. But for me, rifing was kind of just, like I worked with a number of essential oils and definitely did some herbal protocols and parasite cleansing. But rifing, I will really say, just like really saved my ass. And as you were saying, how Lyme just really affects the neurological stuff. When I would herx, it would, like, I would go through these days, or couple day periods where I would just go into these dark black moods as
Oh, yeah.
as I was going through a cycle of healing, because it was just like it would just affect my brain so badly. So, you know, the
I was
journey
at a
is
point there was, one point in my life where I only had about an hour um activity time away from my house before I would forget where I lived. My
mhm.
kids would have to remind me to turn the stove off, to if I had my car keys. I can't tell you how many times I locked myself out of the house.
Oh yeah.
Um, they would make sure I had my driver's license, and I would literally shut down and forget where we lived before I got home, and that is terrifying having two young children as a single
Oh,
mother.
I cannot
And
even
so,
imagine. I mean, I ended up slipping and falling and sustaining a mild concussion back in December of
oof.
2019. And I will just say that, like, that cognitive stuff where you're just like, what did I do with my keys? Where did I put this
Oh my
thing?
gosh,
Yeah,
yes.
it just, and it's like, if you haven't ever been through that kind of cognitive, like, disability, you just have no idea. Like, it's not like you can will yourself to do something different.
And
It just is
knowing
what it is.
that you're losing your mind at the same
Knowing
time
you're losing your mind at the same
is
time,
horribly
it's
depressing.
horrible. It is horrible. Yeah. And in my family, both of my parents have had, my father's passed now, but my mom is still alive, and both of my parents have dementia. Thankfully,
Mhm.
I actually do not have, even though they both had the gene mutation for dementia, I managed to dodge that bullet. So my fingers are crossed that I will be able to escape it, because it's not fun.
I well, I healed all of the white lesions most of the white lesions on my brain by changing my diet and
Hmm.
by incorporating color. I started doing art again. For the first time in 20 years, I started painting again. So color therapy, music, and then I started playing the piano again. I also red light therapy changed my life.
So I found a neuro optometrist who specializes in basically optometry rehab, and he uses this technology called Syntonic, and was able to reboot my brain by having me look through colored goggles. And
Yep.
so, like, it was nothing short of miraculous. And
Mhm.
the thing is, it's an intervention that doesn't involve drugs, it doesn't involve
Yes.
surgery, but what a difference it made. And so, yes, like color therapy, oh my God, what a difference it can make. So
And
incredible.
I'm actually launching this entire it's funny you say that with the an entire product line, an entire it's kind of all come I had to recalibrate all my businesses and stuff. I'm gonna be on the Outer Realm on United Public Radio Network with Michelle and Amelia, who I've been booked for this for months and it was giving me anxiety and I'm like, I need to find the right time and when I'm gonna do this and have it all come together. And I think you just gave me the confidence, I guess, um, to do that. So that will be Wednesday, actually. So the next time you come back, we can talk about because I'm going to be aside from this whole product thing that I'm doing. Um, I'm going to be telling a story that actually most people didn't know. I've never told anybody the whole thing, and I've never been able to tell anyone because spirits and such would erase it, lose it, whatever would happen. So that will be Wednesday night. I'm super excited about it.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
And it's equally terrifying, but it's,
Yeah,
baby
yeah,
steps.
but it's time. They're like, "We will not withhold the
Yes.
information this time. You need to get it out into the world now. We'll let you say it." Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So scary still.
Mhm, mhm.
Jen, thank you so much.
Oh,
I
Trish.
can't
Mm,
wait until the next time.
yeah.
And thank you everyone for tuning in and
Mm.
listening to us. I hope you have gained as much wisdom and knowledge and information from Jen as I have, if not more. I'll probably go back and listen. Just, but we will see you all next week. Have a good shoot. It's Monday. Have a good week.
Yeah, have a great week,
And
you guys.
and until next time, again, just this is the missing piece. New Orleans 105.3 FM and United Public Radio Network. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.